Hello, we're here on a warm December day, kind of foggy, a little damp, but pretty warm. I'm taking advantage of the weather to bring this yearling filly out. Now, we did another segment earlier today where I apologize for appearance, so I won't go into that in detail, but my horses live out. They enjoy living out. If I could live out there with them, I would. I just can't grow as good a hair as they do. So they're well protected, and that's how I want them. I could have them slicker and then they'd shiver, and who needs that? So this girl here, we're going to use a little bit to show some of the things I'll do in advance of riding them to get them ready to ride. So I think I would call this segment teaching your horse to get off your legs on the ground. So one of the first things that you're typically going to want to do with your horse when you get on them, you may want to disengage their hind quarter. If they get a little bit rattled, you want to be able to tip their nose and have them step off to the side. And you see people using sticks and even the end of the rope, and you will get your horse stepping their hips around. Certainly that's a good thing. It has its own application when you're on the ground with your horse, but you're not going to be in that position with those tools when you're first riding your young horse. What you're going to have is maybe a stick, or you could use the end of your line to bump your horse in the hip. But most typically, you'd like to be able to have your horse where they've got some feel off your legs from the get-go. So what I'll do for this particular maneuver, yielding the hips when you're on or disengaging, is I will go back and I'll take my hand and I'll just lay it about where my leg would, and I push. Now see, nothing's happening. Now what would you do with your leg if nothing was happening? Well, you take it away and you give them a bump. So I'm going to push, then go. And she says, what did I do wrong? I said, didn't do anything wrong, you just didn't do enough right. Now, I'm going to stand here and rub on her and not get her to where she just triggers every time I go back there. But now I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to put it back there. I'm going to push just a little. When that doesn't work, bump, 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 bump. And as soon as she moves, there's no more bump. Get her to where we can see her a little better. Take my hand. Don't want her hair trigger. Let's put my hand back there. Bump, bump. And all the while, you're learning a little something about your horse, whether they're going to be real sensitive or whether they're going to be a little bit more laid back, maybe just a little bit more dull. And this filly, somewhat to my surprise, is pretty laid back. She's pretty dull to this particular stimulus. So I want to see what happens if I sort of work on that a bit. I'm getting some movement, and then she doesn't move. Now, you're saying, well, you're whacking your horse. Yeah, I'm whacking her a little bit. Nothing like what a horse would do if they wanted to move her. So I'm just going to take, there. She did that because you couldn't see it on camera. She shot. So I'll tip her nose just a little. Little pressure there. She's stiff. Some of these get it the first time you do it. Some of them take several repetitions. There. I tapped her, but I barely had to that time. So just imagine that I'm up on her. That's my leg. I reach over there. Now, did she go forward more than she moved her hips? Yep, but she moved. So if they're doing something a little wrong or not as much as you want, I'll accept more and a little better instead of perfect. So let's put our hand back there again. There. So in about 5 minutes or so, we've made some real progress. Of course, you do that on both sides, and I'm probably not going to quit while I'm ahead because I'm not ahead enough. But I'll do that a few more times to where when I go back there and just lay a hand on her, she shifts sideways. Now I'm just going to let her stand there for a minute and I'm going to tell you a story because you need to let them soak a little bit. So what I've decided to do is tell a few stories about my old friend Pony Bill, who was my mentor growing up. I mean, I started going over to his place when I was about 14 years old. My mama dropped me off on a Friday and I'd come home one time to go to school on Monday, unless I could manage to find an excuse not to go. And every time I'd get there, it was like Christmas. I'd go out to the barn and see what he'd bought, because he was a trader. Through the week, on Mondays, he'd go to New Holland, he'd bring something back. He'd go to somebody's farm and bring something back. He'd go up to Gene Shoup's up in Dillsburg, who had maybe 200 head of horses, and he'd pick something out of the pasture that he thought had potential and bring it back. So what she's needing to do is just learn to stand still. So one day I get there to Bill's place and there's a big dark gelding, and especially in those days it wasn't all quarter horses. You'd see a lot of different breeds, and this horse clearly had a little bit of draft, maybe a little Percheron in him. He also had some thoroughbred or something, because he was a big typey sort of horse, but he was big boned, had a little hair on his legs. And I said to Bill, I said, that horse out in the lot, get back here. He's a likely looking horse. Can I ride him? And Bill said, yeah, you can ride him. He said, I know he hadn't been ridden in 4 years, so, just use a little caution. Well, I went and saddled him, and he seemed a little woofy, and I put a leg over him, and he just bucked me right off. So I really went to work and sort of got him moving off things and got him to where he was given a little bit, kind of like what I'm doing with this horse here. So I figured, well, 4 years is a long time not to be ridden. So I went and finally got on him, and he didn't do that much then, but he was stone dumb. He didn't guide, he didn't do anything. Now Bill had a little tack shop. He sold things there to folks around the neighborhood. And he was in the shop, and I'd see the curtain pull back. He'd look out and see what was going on. So I'm riding around on this colt, or this horse, and Bill comes out and says, how's it going? I said, well, Bill, he got quieter. He bucked me off the one time. He said, yeah, I saw that. I said, but he doesn't know a darn thing. He doesn't steer. He doesn't move off your leg when you ask him to go. I mean, I guess he just hadn't been ridden in a long time. Bill said, not in 4 years. And a light bulb went on in my head. I said, wait a minute, Bill, how old is he? He said, well, he's a 4-year-old. So, bottom line is, it's nice to start your own horses because you know the whole story. If somebody else tells you the story, take it with a grain of salt, be a little defensive, and don't assume that you're not getting on a 4-year-old that's never been ridden. So, she's standing there pretty quiet. Let's see what she does if I walk back there and ask her to move her hip. See if that stuck at all. See if it got better, see if it got worse. Now, what I didn't want her to do was to just move because of my presence there. So I'm just going to sit back here, and this is a little unfair because I'm stroking her and she's not supposed to move, and then I'm going to ask her to move. So what she did, she leaked forward, but then she stepped over because she remembered. So she's making progress. I think she just sort of liked the story, So I don't want her too casual. I don't want her troubled, but I don't want her too casual. So I get her back in position here, and I'm going to go get on her back, theoretically. And I'm going to tip her nose just a little bit. Reach back here with my leg and say, can you step around? So that's a start. That's the first time she's been exposed to that. I'll get her a whole lot better. I'll get her good on both sides. And when I get on her and I put my leg back there, I need to move her hip over. She's going to be willing to do it. I'll be a little safer. She'll be a little happier. Takes no time. There's no stress involved. Good thing to do with your young horse before you get on their back. Keep it in mind. We'll see you next time.